Hello and welcome back to the Colorado Victim Advocate Podcast. Our podcast is sponsored by Intervention, Inc. Intervention is a nonprofit 501c3 based here in Colorado, providing court services to the various judicial districts around the state. Our podcast today is going to have a returning guest, Ashley. Ashley's first podcast that we had was really great, and a lot of people got some really great comments back from it, just talking a lot about how abuse affects people, domestic violence. And because we wanted to bring her back, we wanted to talk a little bit more about delving into how it begins, what happens with it, because a lot of people don't realize what domestic violence truly is. A lot of people, unfortunately, they see the physical violence, and too many people just say, well, unless there's physical violence, there isn't any violence. And we all know that domestic violence, it begins in so many different ways. And Ashley's going to be talking about her experiences with how she was living in an abusive relationship and how she was wanting to keep it all together despite all of the other violence that she was experiencing. So Ashley, I want to thank you for being here today with us.
Happy to be here.
You know, Ashley, a lot of times too, as we just said a few moments ago, domestic violence really begins in a lot of different ways. And, you know, when you first meet somebody, you don't see that right up front. And then, of course, it starts slowly in that. Can you talk a little bit about how your experience began?
Yes, I mean, my experience began in with the promise of great love.
Mm-hmm.
And a great future and lots of dreams and goals, lots of excitement, and it was perfect.
And that's how a lot of relationships should begin.
Mm-hmm. It felt real. The connection felt real, and perhaps it really truly was for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But it was even within the first 6 months of being together that there were red flags.
But you didn't see them right up front.
And I have to say that I didn't identify those as red flags until well after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
because a lot of people do that. A lot of people, they don't realize that that's an issue. They don't realize that that's something that might be coming later on.
Right. Yeah, I absolutely tolerated things that happened in the beginning all the way throughout the relationship. And I would say, you know, one of the biggest things that started to happen unbeknownst to me was isolation.
Mm-hmm.
I really was not allowed to have friends outside of the inner circle of his approval.
And how did that begin? Because obviously you had relationships, support networks, your family, your friends that you knew before him. How did that begin as far as like, what were some of the words that he would say to you?
You know, the thing is it was very covert. It was very, I can't even say that I really know how that was worded to me. It was more based off action. And at the time I was struggling to find good work. And so I was at home. And I was told that, you know, take your time, find whatever you want to do. I've got you, I'll take care of us.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, and it does sound wonderful. And, you know, the way that I looked at that was not a free ticket, but
Sure.
It was like, okay, I've got some time. And in the midst of that, what was happening was that was the isolation.
Sure.
Don't worry about it. You know, I did land.
That is very covert.
Exactly. So it's nothing that was directly said.
You
know, it wasn't, you can't hang out with that person. And then it became who I would hang out with was quite literally only the people that were approved by him, but not because he said so. It's just how the path was made. And you know, like I had gotten a job and I was working for somebody who really wasn't a good person. And it was my ex who got me fired from that position. You know, and at the time I saw it as him being protective.
Sure.
But when I look back, I was very controlling. Should not have done overstepped the boundaries of calling the employer, emailing the employer, and they traced it back. They traced the IP address back to his work email.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was fired on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, for me, I was very discouraged because here I am in this amazing relationship, head over heels in love, excited about the future.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have a very good job.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other side of that, it's okay. I got you. I'm taking care of us. Don't worry about it. And
and that sounds very that like you said, that's covert, but somebody may even want to say that's insidious, because in one breath, abusers, they're saying, "Oh, I'll take care of you. Everything is going to be just fine." But in the other hand, it's like, I'm abusing you by controlling you, and I'm ruining your professional life.
yes, exactly. Absolutely. Um, and then we navigated through the fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of fun. There was a lot of excitement in the beginning. And then next thing you know, we're getting married.
Mm-hmm. Did you consider that to be almost like a whirlwind?
It was a whirlwind that I thought was my dream come true fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
because I felt that we were on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that he really does have my back. He is taking care of me.
Because that's security, stability. And did you think from that point, okay, I guess everything is really going good. Everything is going to be fine.
Yeah. And, at the time I had also came into the relationship with my own vehicle and had gotten into a car accident that was not my fault.
Mm-hmm.
My car was fine, but at that time he wanted to buy me a new car, help me get this amazing new car. So the car I came into the relationship with was under my name.
Mm-hmm.
And therein began when nothing was in my name.
Which
Place
is part
that we were living,
Mm-hmm.
the bills, then my car.
And did you realize that
And my cell phone.
And what did you realize about that? That nothing was in your name at that point?
At that point, like I said, that I had the rose-colored goggles on because
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was my security.
Mm-hmm.
I really truly thought he and I were building towards a future together where one day we would have a family, and this is just what
Mm-hmm.
we do. I mean, ever since I was a little girl, I always believed in true, deep love.
Mm-hmm.
And I always believed in having that amazing family dynamic and being, regardless of if I brought money into the relationship or not, if I
Mm-hmm.
became a mother, that would be my responsibility,
Sure.
contribution to the household.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 years later, that is exactly the dynamic that we
Sure.
came into.
And I guess, during that time, because, too many people, they don't think that, or they think that, well, isn't that really great that you have this wonderful, amazing, supportive partner, and maybe you can deal with just the rest of it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. In my situation, my partner had a job where he was hardly ever home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so in the beginning, those first 2-4 years, I didn't question anything ever.
Sure. Because it felt safe and secure.
Being supported.
Mm-hmm.
We had at that point moved into the suburbs. We had a house with an attached garage.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of like the dream. That's the dream.
I had a baby, but that is when the ultimate isolation happened, where I was always at home. I was always in the box.
Mm-hmm.
And he had long hours, yes, but also had lots of excursions on the way home.
Okay.
And those were things that I did not recognize until later in the relationship, until I started to question, well, why are you coming home so late? Did you really work that late?
Sure.
Why do you smell like alcohol this time? Things like that. Why is it so hard to get a time frame from you? I'm trying to have dinner ready for you. The babies want to see you before they go to bed, this and that kind of thing. Granted, the hours really truly were long hours, but that was also his excuse to live a double life.
Sure.
A life I didn't know anything about.
And when you in your position, you're thinking about those things in your mind of like, okay, well, I am trying to make a home as best that you can, the model home,
Mhm.
having dinner ready, having the kids
Mhm.
prepared, all that kind of thing too. At what point did you kind of see, because you just talked about that a few moments ago, at what point did you think that something really isn't going right here?
That's so hard to say because when I look back, I feel like it was just always like that. I just didn't see it
Sure.
until it was in a way kind of scary,
Mm-hmm.
and in a way where I I just I wasn't sure of anything.
Sure.
And because I wasn't sure of anything, and because of the reputation that he had with
Mm-hmm.
our circle at work, with our families, you know, whatever, social media looked a certain way, you know, I felt like, well, maybe it's not that bad,
Exactly. And
you know?
and tragically, too many victims will utilize, it's not an excuse, it's a reason. It's like, it's not that bad. We can get past this. Or there's, that there's, he really is trying.
Mhm.
Or, she's really, working hard. And when you just said that, it's really not that bad. How did that internally make you feel, as far as like, how you were feeling about the relationship, kind of using that as a reason?
Well, a relationship was a struggle.
Mhm.
It was the ultimate highs and the
Mhm.
ultimate lows. I
Mhm.
started to realize that the amazing bouquets of flowers I would get came after a weekend of I'll never do that again.
Mhm.
Um, and I started to kind of glaze over
Mhm.
the behaviors and favor the the family time that we had when it was just us on our Sundays, which is all we ever had because of work.
Sure.
And I would see him with our daughters, and he was amazing with our daughters.
Mhm.
They truly loved their daddy.
And that's
You know,
truly what you would always want to remember, is that
exactly.
correct?
Hmm.
Because then you would see that person as being like, okay, this is not the person that was a couple of days ago.
Yeah, a couple of days ago, who was putting me on red, not answering the phone, out with friends, not home until 3 in the morning, sometimes till the sun came up,
Mhm.
and I'm at home with the kids.
And at that point, when you kind of saw these two parallels of, you're trying to make this wonderful life, and it is a wonderful life in that moment on a really nice Sunday when things are going great. And then that other parallel of what's going on with this? How are you trying to manage that emotionally and psychologically? Because too many victims, unfortunately, they just don't recognize that point. And fortunately, as a survivor, you did. And what would you say to those folks that might be experiencing something like it?
Well, what's really tricky about my personal experience is to not get caught up in when you're brought into the mix too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not to say that I didn't go out and have fun with him also,
Sure.
When I was brought into it, like, oh, I'm going to bring my old lady tonight. And I got to see what they did and have fun and partake. It was kind of like, oh, okay, well, it's not that bad. But there also comes a point where after a certain time in the night, it is that bad. But it's like me being part of that, and then us, having good times with our friends,
Sure.
with our kids in tow.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, it is okay. But when I realized that it wasn't okay is when my heart started to hurt. Like
Mm-hmm.
my literal heart was hurting
Physically.
physically,
Mm-hmm.
because it was hard. For an example, if he would come home late after a night of working late, maybe working late or not, the kids are already in bed. I'm exhausted. I'm gonna run around after two little youngsters all day,
Mm-hmm.
and keeping the house. And if I was too tired to spend time with him in the evening, he would be pissed, quite literally pissed. How do you expect us to have a happy relationship and have any intimacy and have connection and this and this and this when I come home, you're just sleeping. You're so tired.
So now the focus is really shifting from...
It shifts to me not being able to uphold, me not being good enough, or him coming home and perhaps seeing that there's still toys in a certain area. Maybe he kicks one when he walks in and he gets really pissed and he'll kick it, or he'll get upset with me. You know, what have you been doing all day? I've been out working. I'm paying the bills. What are you doing? And so those are the things that really started to happen daily. It was
okay. So now
was daily.
Now we're starting to progress into what people see as, okay, this is now where the quote unquote real abuse is starting.
Right. It's a devaluation of who you are.
And talk about that too, because a lot of people don't really use that word a lot about devaluating somebody in an intimate relationship.
I mean, I was devalued when we would receive a bill in the mail that we weren't expecting. I was devalued when the trash can was full. I was devalued when, you know, the babies were crying or too much for him to handle at certain periods of time. I was devalued when I would ask questions of whereabouts. Yeah, it was really, it's picking, it's just these little picking away at you type of things. And I started to realize how that was affecting my health, not just my physical health, but also my psychological health. I started to not feel very confident about who I was. I started to be very low energy, not have a lot of energy. So it's depression.
Yeah, the onset of depression, where you're really feeling like, you know, that nothing is going right. Yes, you're not good enough, and yet you still feel like it,
even though I'm literally doing everything in my power, all the way to the point of making sure that his lunch is made and he walks out the door with me telling him he looks amazing and I hope you have an awesome day. You know, walking out to the car with a baby on the hip. We love you, you know, like, and it was never good enough.
and in doing so, when you're seeing all those things, at that point, how do you feel like, you know, how did you start to react to that? Did you do anything different from that point of realizing, you know, I don't feel good about myself. I feel like I'm sliding into depression. How did you start to work in that, to work through that, to get past it, to do the best you could?
Well, thankfully I found yoga and I started the practice of yoga. I started to do a little self-study type things, journaling, reading lots of books, listening to podcasts. And I started to, we worked out together. That was something that we did.
That's good.
Like we did like to work out. We did like to stay healthy in that way. But I felt that the spiritual aspect and the connection of my mind, body, spirit through yoga and meditation was something that could really, truly help us. At the same time, I was starting to dive into that. That's when he was having this reckoning within himself where he couldn't do what he was doing anymore.
Sure.
And so it was like the perfect recipe for us to embark on yoga together. And we did. And I would say that was probably the happiest time of our relationship.
And so at that point, you just feel like, you know, okay, things really are good. Things really are good.
Beyond like that, you know, that was 6 years after we'd been together already.
Sure.
2 kids later.
Sure. And from that point, you know, how did it kind of revert back to where you were seeing this is happening again?
Well, we went through, you know, the awakening together with yoga, and that really brought us closer together. And I really truly feel that he himself had some major epiphanies, you know, and grew to a certain level. And that was really exciting. And so from there, unfortunately, the pandemic, I lost my mother. She had passed. And then unfortunately, the pandemic.
Sure.
And, you know, we had made some decisions on entrepreneurship. We had made some decisions on quitting. He quit his job because after yoga, he realized how much he really truly hated the job that he was working, because it was sucking the life out of him. It was not allowing for the financial side of it allowed for a certain quality of life for us. But at that point, he really realized and valued being with his family, me and his daughters. And so we had embarked on that. But then the pandemic happened, and, a lot of people lost money, savings and things like that. But also people were together, forced to be together.
Really together.
Exactly.
Yes. And those stressors that were already there at the bottom were really starting to come up at the top.
They were amplified. Absolutely. And not only was he, he was impacted by outside influences, not just with his friend group, but what was going on in politics. Became very animated about that. The fact that we were home more, and not having to necessarily be, in an office, there was more drinking. And for a minute there, it was fun being together and being with the girls and having our little backyard bonfires and listening to music and having an amazing time. But he became very stir crazy and wasn't out with his friends and wasn't doing whatever else it was that he did. And then there came a point where he did start to go do things and meet with his friends. And that's when, we were sharing each other's locations on our cell phones. And I just felt things. I can't say that I actually knew certain things, but I started to feel things. That's when I started to really trust my intuition, because I had been in the vicinity with him for so many hours, day in, day out. It wasn't like he could go to the office and say whatever he wanted to say and I wouldn't have a clue. He was at home and I had a clue. Okay. And that was when, behaviors started to really bother me. I mean, the alcohol was insane. The amount of tequila bottles that were stacking up in our recycling bin. I wasn't drinking all that tequila. I would have a margarita here and there, but there's no way I could handle that. And, just looking at that, I thought, wow, I actually took a picture of it and sent it to one of my friends. And I said, how is this happening? And she said, that's a problem. And so for me, that was a little bit of a red flag. And I started to pay attention more to when he said he was leaving, what he was doing, where he was going. And he would tell me one thing, but go do a completely different thing. And that was the point where I became very discouraged in our relationship. And that was also the point where the gaslighting of me tapping into my intuition and just knowing something wasn't right. And then actually having facts by watching his whereabouts on our sharing our location, And I'm not going to lie, I did look at his cell phone a few times. I did see some of the things that he was saying because I felt like I had to.
You felt like you had to reassure yourself, and you did. You did. And unfortunately, there's too many people that will continue to take things not on faith, but on love. Are you interested in hearing the rest of Ashley's story? If so, join us next time while Ashley and I discuss what it takes to leave an abusive relationship and start to thrive. Thank you so much for listening to the Colorado Victim Advocate podcast. You can find us both on Spotify and on our YouTube channel. Just search Colorado Victim Advocate.